The first time I heard about Ilhan Omar, it was a matter of controversy. A Muslim politician flippantly referred to 9/11 as some people doing something? That did sound weird. Was she like downplaying 9/11? And ooh, it's the first Muslim ever to get elected in America? Yeah, people are going to be unhappy about that, right? I didn't look into it back then though. Over time I heard about Ilhan Omar more, as she was included when people talked about the Squad, a nickname given to these 4 female members of Congress who were all noticeably left-wing. I don't know what that was about. I don't know why they had this shared nickname, but Omar was deemed to be one of them. I didn't hear much about her specifically though. I just remember her sort of being in the spotlight because this term referred to her. Then I remember some schizo posting online, people digging through old documents claiming she married her brother. Trump even drew attention to this in 2019, but in his typical fuck-dick way of wording things.
Well, there's a lot of talk about the fact that she was married to her brother. I know nothing about it. I hear she was married to her brother.
By blurting it off like this, Trump somehow perpetuates baseless lies without assuming any responsibility for doing so, because people just look at the quote and they go, well, I mean, he said he knows nothing about it, right? Hey guys, there's a lot of talk about Trump molesting all of his own children when they were toddlers, including the boys. Maybe that's why they're so weird. I know nothing about it, though. I've just heard that he molested all his kids. I don't know anything about it. It's just something that some people said. But not me, though. I'm not saying it. I don't know anything. As it turns out, the rumor about Omar was completely made up. To this day, there's simply no evidence she was ever married to her brother, and there's paperwork documenting both Omar's family history and the personal history of the men she ended up marrying, which you could use to prove the negative and say no, her husband was definitely not related to her. There were numerous other smears about Omar being spread around back then, all of them repeated and amplified by Trump, of course. This is a man whose audience cheered when he said he wants to ban all Muslims from the country, so I guess picking on the one Muslim member of Congress just does it for them. Actually, she's not the only Muslim, but the other one doesn't wear the Muslim head thingy, so how can you expect them to know? He said a bunch of typical scary Muslim stuff, like that she loved Al-Qaeda, that she blamed America for 9/11. I mean, kinda, right? Like, wasn't it caused a little bit by stuff America did? Isn't that a whole thing that some people talk about, right? Like, they call it blowback? Isn't that a talking point? Like, it's not just some crazy thing that Omar made up because she's a Muslim, right? Like, that's a real analysis of the... Okay, whatever. Trump said that she smeared U.S. service members involved in Black Hawk Down, which refers to the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993. The Battle of Mogadishu happened after Omar's family left the country. The US and UN had become involved in the region after the Somali regime fell in 91, and they all got wrapped up in fighting the insurgents who had taken over in the aftermath. Then at some point, the Somali fighters shot down 3 American Black Hawk helicopters, which is what the book and movie were named after. They rolled through the area trying to rescue the survivors, leading to even more people dying, and then eventually decided this whole situation was just fucked and they didn't want to bother, so they packed up and left the country. A bunch of Americans died, but way more Somalis died, which I think is all Omar was saying. But who the fuck even knows any of this shit? Trump definitely fucking doesn't, and there's no way that any of these people are gonna stop and consider it in detail. The point is that she's a Muslim, and she said the American soldiers did a bad thing, which is bad, because America is good, and Muslims are bad. The Somalian Muslims shot down our helicopters, damn it. Think about the brave American soldiers who died on those helicopters. Then early last year, 2024, there was another controversy about her. It was widely claimed that Omar said she's working in Congress to represent the interests of Somalia. Well, that doesn't sound right. Then I heard that she said she's Somalian first, Muslim second. What? That does sound like a weird fucking thing for a politician to say. Unless you're saying that your religion is the thing you are first, that would kind of be fair, wouldn't it? Because there are Christians who say they're Christian first and foremost. That was a thing Mike Pence used to say. Or maybe he still says it. I don't know, I haven't heard from him for a while. But he used to say he's a Christian, conservative, and a Republican, in that order.
I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order.
He loved saying that shit. He said it all the time. And notice how he doesn't include American either. Where's American on your list, sir? It's really the Somalian first part that sounds weird, because that's another country. Unless she meant the Somali ethnic group, but that's also weird, just for different reasons. I remember back then I looked up where the quote came from, just to be sure it was like a real thing. I found a video of it online, a speech that Omar gave, but it wasn't in English, it's her speaking Somali. But there were translated subtitles, which I just took for granted. I just assumed these translations were accurate. It's very easy for the meaning of something to get twisted in translation, though. When I was a bit younger, I remember Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran from 2005 to 2013, was frequently on TV saying Iran-related stuff on the news, back when Barack Obama something Iran deal. And one of the most peculiar things that Ahmadinejad was quoted saying is that there are no gay people in Iran. Was he like super brainwashed or something? Was he just lying? Are they so anti-gay over there that he's like never heard of a gay Iranian person? Maybe he thinks that homosexuality is like an induced condition that only the West gives rise to. But this was actually a translation issue, and a more accurate translation of what he said would have been something like, "We don't have homosexuals like your countries do." Meaning there are homosexuals in Iran, of course, but they're not like Western homosexuals. Our gays are not like your gays. The phenomena, the gay identity, the gay community, it doesn't manifest socially in the same way. Word for word, these translations aren't that far off, but the resulting meaning, in terms of what we can take Ahmadinejad himself to believe about the world, is rather different. One is delusional or strangely naive, while the other is, well, basically true. The main part about this Ilhan Omar speech that upset people was, per the viral posts about it, "We are Somalians first, Muslims second." Then she goes on to say, "The US is a country where one of your daughters," which is referring to herself, I'm pretty sure, "is in Congress to represent your interest." Meaning, like, Somalian interest? The interests of Somalia as a country? Is that what she means? Maybe it is, because then down here she says, "I'm here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the US system." As it's written here, I understand not liking this. When I read this the first time, I thought, that's kind of bad. I'm not that invested in it because I'm not American, so for me this is just some random American politician who barely matters as far as I can tell. But still, I understand why people would object. Ilhan Omar says the translation that circulated on social media is inaccurate, not only slanted but completely off. What would have been interesting is if she sat down and replayed the whole speech and told us exactly what it all meant in her own words in English, just to make it very clear what she did and didn't say. Is that asking too much? I don't know. If I were her media manager person, I would have suggested she do something like that. An interesting note is that she said Somalian people aren't called Somalians, they're called Somalis. So she's not a Somalian American, she's a Somali American. I assumed the language is called Somali, but whatever. This could be a small piece of evidence to suggest maybe the viral translation was made by somebody not all that familiar with the Somali language. The Minnesota Reformer, a local newspaper, pointed out that the first section of the viral transcript is mistranslated at a very key point that does seem rather deliberate. Where the viral translation says they are Somalians first, Muslims second, Omar actually just said they are Somali and Muslim. There was no mention of first or second, nor of the implied meaning that would be present in English if you say that you identify as a given thing first, which suggests primacy over all other identities. It does look like whoever made this post inserted that phrasing, this Somalian first, Muslim second phrasing, to make Omar sound bad, to create the Somalian first, Muslim second soundbite, and then have that spread across social media in the form of headlines nobody bothers checking out. Come to think of it, who did this translation? Where did it come from? Where did this video originate? I have no idea. It could have been any random, right-wing propagandist dude just lying about what she's saying. There's a user going by the name of Abdirahid Hashi, who seems like a Somali user, although I can't confirm much more about him than that he seems like a Somali guy, who shared what he says is a more reasonable translation of what Omar said. "We Somalis are people who love each other. It's possible that some of us are rough with each other, but when the going gets tough, we're people who have each other's backs. We are brothers and sisters, supporting each other, people who know they are Somalis and Muslims, coming to each other's aid, and aiding their brothers and sisters." So in this first bit, it sounds like the reference to "we know we're Somalis and Muslims" is purely a way of saying that we feel some sense of connection or camaraderie with one another. It's like if I said that we Americans, we fight with each other sometimes, but ultimately we're all Americans, right? Like it's just pointing out something we have in common. Or if you're Christians, it could be, we're ultimately all brothers in Christ, so we have each other's back, or something like that. And the other day, when we heard that Somalis, or those who say they are Somalis, entered an MOU as a Memorandum of Understanding with Ethiopia, many people called me and said, "Ilhan, you should talk to the US government. What is the US government going to do about this?" My response was, the US government will do what we ask it to do. We live in this country, we are taxpayers in this country. This country is one where one of your daughters sits in Congress. So what she's saying is, this country is a democracy, so it's not just a question of what does the ruler think. We can make our voices heard. We are actually in a country where ordinary people have some political will and some political voice. For example, we got me, a member of the community, to sit in Congress. That's like a demonstration of the power of democracy, is that we have a seat at the table here. While I am in Congress, no one will take Somalia's sea. The United States will not back others to rob us. So do not lose sleep over it, oh Minnesotans. The lady that you sent to Congress is on this, and she is as cognizant of this interest as you are. So all she's saying is like, yeah, I hear you, my constituents who vote for me, and I'm aware of the issues that concern you, and I agree, and I'm on it, and I'm going to do what I can as a congressperson to advocate for the solution or the position or whatever that you guys want. There's not really anything wrong with this part. I would like to tell President Hassan Sheikh that we are impressed with the great work you have done. You have made it known to those people in Somalia and other places that, in spite of the many challenges we face as Somalis, we are nonetheless competent people who believe in their country and will not allow it to be endangered. Like, if it were in English, I would say you shouldn't say our country about a country other than the country you're a politician in. I guess that would be, it might just sound different in Somali, though. I don't know their language, or, like, what would be... I feel like little customs or, like, implications like that might not translate well. I don't know. Has she ever said something like that in English? Well, I guess if she hasn't, then people will just say, aha, you see, because she's trying to hide it from us English speakers. She only says this to Somalis. I want to congratulate the Somalis in Minnesota and everywhere else on how united you are, how you all stood by our president because he needs our solidarity. Somalia belongs to all Somalis. Somalia is one. We are brothers and sisters, and our lands will not be Balkanized. Our lands were taken from us before, and God willing, we may one day seek them, but what we have now will not be Balkanized. What? This part sounds like she's saying that some territory was taken from Somalia and from like Ethiopia, and is she saying that the country of Somalia should seize that land one day in the future? I guess nobody in America gives a fuck if that is what she's saying, so whatever. I thank you all for how you always welcome and honor me, and may the Lord honor you. Peace and blessings and God be with you. Oh, okay. There is room for criticism of this, especially if you're the kind of person who says Americans shouldn't be hyphenated. That if you're an American, you shouldn't still care or feel invested in the politics of any other country. You should just be an American, and that's it. Whereas here, Omar is expressing that she feels some kind of connection to the Somali people and to the fate of Somalia. So yeah, you could, if your position is that this reflects her having like a mixed identity or mixed loyalties or whatever, which is a milder form of what some people were accusing her of. But, I don't know, don't lots of Americans have mixed identities and a mixed loyalty? Like, is that really... I don't know. But even if that is the case, it doesn't mean that she's siding against America. It doesn't mean that she's trying to undermine America for Somalia's benefit. There's no conflict between the US and Somalia. It's not like she has to choose one or the other. So what are we talking about here? Maybe if there were a full-blown war between the US and Somalia, this might be the kind of thing to worry about. But, like, what are we doing? Now, what the fuck was she even talking about in this? What is this Memorandum of Understanding with Ethiopia? Somebody taken their land? Ilhan Omar was born in Somalia in 1983. Then she fled with her family due to the Somali Civil War. Somaliland is a separatist region that emerged out of this conflict. And it's interesting that it goes by the name Somaliland because that's what Somalia itself used to be called. But back then, Somalia didn't include the region that is now Somaliland. It was just the eastern and southern part. This new Somaliland currently operates independently in the north, to the dismay of the rest of Somalia, as ruled by the president and military and the southern capital of Mogadishu, which is the coolest sounding city name ever, Mogadishu. I fucking love that city's name. It sounds like something from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Oh, they had a city called Omashu. Also, I think Mogadishu might be an exonym, and they would probably pronounce it differently in Arabic, but whatever. In English, the way that we say Mogadishu is fucking cool. That's the point. Anyway, the government of Ethiopia had recently come to an agreement with the government of Somaliland, which is bad because they're treating them like an independent country. And Somaliland is, as part of that agreement, allowing Ethiopia to cross their territory in order to access the water, which, from Somalia's perspective, isn't their land to be granting anyone access to. That's Somalia! You guys are part of us! And Ethiopia, how dare you make an international agreement concerning our land with this illegal splinter group thing that's trying to claim a chunk of us? That's our land, not theirs. You should know better. This is what prompted Omar to speak on the issue. When she says people who call themselves Somalis, she's referring to the people of Somaliland. The implication is that they're not being true Somalis because they're, like, betraying Somalia. For what it's worth here, I offer no real judgment about the current political situation. I don't know if Ilhan Omar is in the right or wrong when it comes to Somaliland, but the majority population of Somaliland are members of a clan called the Isaaq, who were attacked in a state-sponsored genocide by the Somali dictator Siad Barre. The region declared its independence from the rest of Somalia after his dictatorship fell, and as I mentioned earlier, the previous iteration of Somalia didn't include the north, so there's definitely a sympathetic story to be told here. I'm sure that somebody more knowledgeable about Somaliland could make a case for why they're totally in the right to leave. But for whatever reason, I guess Omar doesn't agree. And hey, it's not like Omar is defending the dictatorship. It's not around anymore. As some people pointed out, Ilhan Omar's speech was not really that different in character from the speeches given by other lawmakers of immigrant backgrounds. Imagine if there was a conflict that broke out tomorrow in, I don't know, let's say Italy. There's a lot of Italian Americans, and there's a rogue section of Italy taking over some part of the country. Would an Italian immigrant politician be able to come forward and say, hey everybody, the US ought to support Italy, and refuse to acknowledge the legitimacy of this breakaway region? Well, yeah, probably. What if they also had some part of the speech that was directed specifically toward other Italians, or spoke about Italians as a group of people who had some kind of commonality, and a lot of them had family back in Italy, and then he said that we as Americans have a political voice here in the US, and we can influence what the US government does when it comes to fighting what's going on back in home country. And then what if he referred to the Italian Prime Minister as our Prime Minister? Wouldn't that be something? I think that some people would be critical of this, but he would also get away with it. It wouldn't be nearly as big a deal. People wouldn't explode about this the way they did about Omar. Well, okay, no, I guess it's hard to measure the exact reaction, because part of the reaction to Ilhan Omar wasn't a reaction to her actual speech. It was like a distortion, an exaggeration of her speech. I'm just saying, there's clearly some bias going on here. I feel like if Ilhan Omar had expressed herself in English and just been a little more politically sensitive, this probably could have gone over fine. When she was asked about this, Ilhan Omar did later say that she supports a united Somalia, which aligns with long-standing US policy favoring a one Somalia approach. My stance remains consistent with the goal of a stable and unified Somalia. Now, I say that I remember not liking her statements back when I first heard about them. That just means that I saw them in writing, I thought to myself, I don't like that, and then I didn't really do anything about it. When I look back at how other people reacted, I realized that other people's reactions were insane. Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor of Florida, he said that she should be forcibly expelled from Congress, lose her citizenship, and be deported from the country. Over these statements? What the fuck? And then you had Marjorie Taylor Greene, motherfucking Magic the Gathering herself, who went even crazier, calling Omar a terrorist sympathizer, America hater who's acting as a foreign agent who should be deported from the country. Okay, well I guess that's also what DeSantis said. The fact that Ilhan Omar is a citizen of their country seems to be of no concern to these people. Just say one thing they don't like and you can rip away a person's citizenship and deport them. Think about that for just a second. In their view, it is okay to rip away the citizenship from somebody who's been a citizen for decades, who was elected to public office, to Congress, and deport them from the country if they say one thing that you don't like, and also if they're a Muslim woman, is really what they're saying. Ilhan Omar was asked for comment about Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion against her. Omar said, "I have nothing to say about the insanity of that woman." That's fair. An understatement, really. Look at all this reactionary garbage on YouTube that's just people reiterating these same stupid points, calling her a foreign agent, calling her to resign. Try this in Somalia, Ilhan Omar, you'd disappear.
It's amazing to me that in America, Ilhan Omar can
Omar?
online and in real life criticize the President of the United States.
The President of the United States.
But
the President
in
of the United States.
Somalia, where she's from, if she said little Bo Peep,
What is that
or whoever the
expression?
leader of the piracy of Somalia is these days, she'd be goners.
Oh my god,
You know,
what
it's
a
so
dumb, ignorant
amazing.
piece of shit. What the fuck is he talking about? This fucking microwaved burrito eater saw the fucking South Park episode about Somali pirates and thinks he knows enough to talk about their society. And what kind of argument even is this? Like, even if it were true that Somalia were some crazy dictatorship where you get arrested for criticizing the government, what are we saying? Therefore somebody from there can't criticize the government in America? Hey, the government here in America is doing a thing I disagree with. Oh yeah? Well, you are from a bad country, so fuck you. Like, what is this discourse? Ooh, black conservative perspective. He's got his bow tie on. What a fancy looking man. We're in for some intellectual takes.
All right, guys. So we got to talk about a pretty wild speech from Ilhan
really
Omar. And that suggests that she could be a foreign agent acting on behalf of Somalia. Okay, it seems...
Okay, that's enough of that. Shut the fuck up. Oh my god, this guy's made so many videos just about Ilhan... Yeah, fuck this dude. Ilhan Omar's allegiance, Somalia or America? Ugh. Did Ilhan Omar betray America over Somalia? Did none of these people bother looking into this shit before they started publishing their opinions about it No, what am I saying? Of course not. I mean, I know that I didn't really look into it back then either, but I also wasn't making videos like this where I proclaim that she's like a traitor to the country. Ilhan Omar thinks the US is worse than Somalia. Does she? This one is only from a couple months ago.
To have a democracy, a beacon of hope for the world to now be turned into one of the worst countries where the military are in our streets.
Is that her saying the US is worse than Somalia? That's not really... I mean, look, to say that the US is the worst country in the world would be an overstatement. Hyperbole. One of the worst countries? Still hyperbole, it's not one of the worst countries. But to me, it sounded like it's becoming one of the worst countries, as in it's gaining the qualities that we associate with the worst countries. Like if the government started censoring everything and I said, oh god, we're becoming the Soviet Union. Or if we started executing people by gas chamber and I was like, oh, what is this, Nazi Germany? When did she say this? I want to know more, actually. I could find more of this quote on numerous right-wing websites, but none of them expanded much or included where they got it from until I found it on Newsweek. They said that it's remarks Omar made on Democracy Now! Okay.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
Can you imagine that image that is going to be coming out of our country? I mean, I grew up in a dictatorship. And I don't even remember ever witnessing anything like that. To have a democracy, a beacon of hope for the world to now be turned into one of the worst countries where the military are in our streets without any regard for people's constitutional rights, while our president is spending millions of dollars propping himself up like a failed dictator with a military parade. It is really shocking, and it should be a wake-up call for all Americans to say this is not the country we were born in. This is not the country we believe in. This is not the country our founding fathers imagined. And this is not the country that is supported by our Constitution, our ideals, our values. And we should all collectively be out in the streets rejecting what is taking place this week.
I don't think there's any way she literally thinks the US is currently the worst country, but in this segment she's talking about Trump putting on a military parade, which is something that we kind of associate with a lot of places that we consider to be like the worst countries. So, I don't know. This just feels like an in-the-moment, imprecise phrasing that they latched onto because the rest of this is just true. The story of America right now is really fucking sad. It was a beacon of hope for much of the world, and now it's plunging itself into authoritarianism, corruption, the disruption of rule of law at the hands of a deranged executive. But that one part where she says, to be turned into one of the worst countries, yeah, oh, that part is technically wrong. Okay, you got her. You got her. They really took this appearance, just shaved away all but that one part, and then went, excuse me? One of the worst countries? How dare you? Also, if a white dude said this, nobody would fucking care. Anyway, back to these wieners.
For her to say we're turning into one of the worst countries on earth, there are so many videos of her at rallies where she's saying that I want folks to think of me as the congresswoman from Somalia, and I'm going to do everything to support Somalia and use my role in Congress to support Somalia. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. All we're hearing is you're saying America's one of the worst countries on earth. You're doing everything you can to try to get taxpayers to support Somalia, and you're like, when I was in
This dude saw that fucking Facebook post like a year earlier about the dishonest translation from that one speech, and then while in the back of his mind, that somehow expanded into all this other shit.
Taxpayers to support Somalia, and
she's going to do everything she can to get taxpayers to support Somalia? What are you talking about?
You're like, when I was in Somalia, I never saw anything this bad.
When I was in Somalia, I never saw... Well, no, She says that she didn't see military parades or the military being deployed to the streets like this. I think she did see worse in Somalia, but the violence was primarily gangs or just random people attacking each other after the rebellion started, not the military being deployed against the civilians of said military to keep them in line. So in that respect, I mean, I think she's right. I don't think the Somali government had to do that under Siad Barre, so, I mean, I haven't heard otherwise at least.
You gotta go. Go back. You gotta go back.
It's a failed state. Like, there's literally pirates.
Holy shit, pirates. Again, people unironically have a meme understanding of Somalia. They remember hearing that there were Somali pirates like 10 years ago or something, and that's the only thing they've ever heard about Somalia in their lives, so that's it. They think Somalia is just fucking pirate land. Who even are these retards? Ruthless. The Ruthless Podcast. Oh god, they're so ruthless. What did Fox News say about it back then?
Governor Ron DeSantis ripping Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for her so-called Somalia First speech over the weekend.
The so-called Somalian First,
and it's been really picked up. It's gone viral because of her comments about putting Somalia first. And to be clear, she emigrated here. Well, she left Somalia in 1991. She spent 4 years in a Kenyan refugee camp, and then she comes to the United States.
Yeah, that's true.
But in this speech, here's what she said and what people are criticizing her. For as long as I am in the U.S. Congress, Somalia will never be in danger. Its waters will not be stolen by Ethiopia or others. Sleep in comfort knowing that I am here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. The woman you sent to Congress working day and night to protect your interests. Well, Governor Ron DeSantis...
No, they didn't include the Somalia First Muslim Second part.
Shorter. He said expel from Congress, denaturalize, and deport. Like, who do you care about here, Ilhan Omar? Anyway, she...
The tone here isn't too harsh. They just need to fact check the translation.
Land lease negotiations with other countries without the consent of the federal government. Somalis in Somalia and in the diaspora united in that effort, and I stand in solidarity with them. No amount of harassment and lies will ever change that. So look, I mean, there's a water dispute between Ethiopia and Somalia, but it's again, you're here in the United States now. Yeah. You're serving in Congress.
Mm-hmm. Do your job here.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
What matters to you?
You work on behalf of the Somalis. And the fact that she would even say that she's going to work from inside the system, that should frighten everybody.
Oh, and then this dude at the end just kills it. Hey, audience, this ought to frighten you. Yeah.
It's frightening.
It actually wasn't as bad as the random podcast bro guys. Look at some of these comments. She just stated she does not believe in her oath to the U.S. She needs to be labeled a traitor and expelled. She confesses to be first and foremost a foreign agent. That's treason. How is this even a question? Somalia is neither a state or territory of the US. Why do we seat its representative in Congress? This is propaganda working. These people all fell for it. And to this day, if they see Ilhan Omar's name in the news, this is probably what they think of. It was so effective because it played into exactly what people are afraid of when it comes to a person like Ilhan Omar, a foreigner from a weird religion who speaks a language that you don't understand while wearing her weird religious head thing that you don't wear. Ooh! I decided to go back to the very first thing I remember about Omar, which was her 9/11 comments, and I realized that was kind of bullshit too. First of all, this doesn't appear to have been a deliberately crafted statement where the wording was carefully chosen for its impact and meaning. It seems like an off-the-cuff remark that she only said once in a long speech that was primarily about something else. I'm just going to play this section of her speech because I actually really appreciate her message here.
But no matter how much we have tried to be the best neighbor, people have always worked on finding a way to not allow for every single civil liberty to be extended to us. So the truth is, you can go to school and be a good student, listen to your dad and mom and become a doctor. It doesn't matter how good you were. If you can't have your prayer mat and take your 15-minute break to go pray in a country that was founded on religious liberty. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you one day find yourself in a school where other religions are talked about, but when Islam is mentioned, we are only talking about terrorists. So to me, I say raise hell, make people uncomfortable. Because here's the truth. Here's the truth. Far too long, we have lived with the discomfort of being a second-class citizen. And frankly, I'm tired of it. And every single Muslim in this country should be tired of it. CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. So you can't just say that today someone is looking at me strange, that I am going to try to make myself look pleasant. You have to say, this person is looking at me strange. I am not comfortable with it. I am going to go talk to them and ask them why, because that is a right you have. There are people, and Hassan is on the right track. It's always good, right? I say you can't hate up close. You can't hate up close. Anytime you have an opportunity to go talk to someone, the chances of them hating you lessens. So that is a practice we should all adopt.
She wasn't trying to minimize 9/11. She's not telling you the attacks weren't really that bad or that you should just get over it. She was talking about the change in scope. Some of us did something, but now all of us are paying the price. She's talking about the shared experience of fear that Muslims experienced after 9/11. But those few words ended up clipped from the rest of this event and circulated all over the place. I didn't realize the reach of it at the time. There were people showing up to right-wing events with "some people did something" shirts, just to let us know how dearly offended they were by this one sentence. Or not even a sentence, a part of a sentence, which they were probably only even aware of in the first place because their Facebook feed or something told them to be upset about it. Aside from a few minor miswordings, has Ilhan Omar really done anything wrong? Many of the Somalis living in Minnesota are refugees from the same conflict she is. They came to America fleeing violence and chaos. They made lives here. From age 13, Ilhan grew up in America, first in Virginia, then Minnesota. She quickly learned English, persevered in school, went to university, and eventually emerged as a leading voice raised up by her community, until they elected her to speak for them in Congress. Isn't that kind of a great story? In the process of looking through all this bad coverage about her, I became more curious about what kind of person Ilhan Omar really is. I think the impression that some people have is that Ilhan Omar doesn't like America. The stereotype of a Somalian person is that it's a clan-based society where everybody is very loyal to their group, and there's a fear about Muslims sticking together and trying to undermine other groups in order to spread their religion. The politicization of Islam and what we call Islamism, trying to spread Islam at all costs, because the word of their God is the only thing that really matters, that feels like a real problem in some places. And I don't just mean when it spills over into violent extremism. In the United States, more and more people are talking about Christian nationalism, and that's a frightening social force, but they're not at the level of a violent terrorist group. They just have really problematic beliefs, and those beliefs have political implications. That is more the problem when it comes to Muslims. A lot of normal Muslims are Muslims in the same way that Christian nationalists are Christians. They're not violent terrorists, they're just normal people who go to work and have a family, but their beliefs are pretty frightening when you get down to it. I remember reading about cases in, I think it was Sweden, where the local imams would say one thing when talking to the media, but then investigative journalists would sneak back into the mosque and hear what they were saying to their own community when they thought the white people weren't listening, and there was a frightening shift in tone and message. Some of us have heard that in Islam there's a practice called taqiyya, which in the best case scenario means that if a dude puts a gun to your head and tells you to renounce Islam, your God has just preemptively given you permission to go ahead and renounce him because you don't really mean it. You just gotta say what you gotta say in order to live. It's okay to secretly believe if being open about your belief leads to persecution. But this concept can be stretched to absurdity, and some Islamic extremists can take it so far as to say that you can basically just lie to infidels whenever you want, so long as it's in the service of Islam. This type of discourse all contributes to a distrust about Muslims. And I might have been biased against Ilhan Omar when I first heard about her because of this. I don't want any spooky Islam herka-durka jihad in my country, throwing them gays off the roofs and putting my women in black bedsheets. So I come back to Ilhan Omar, and I say, is that what's going on here? Is she like a deeply religious Muslim who actually kind of resents America? I wanted to understand what Ilhan's life was like, to understand her perspective and values as a person. So I got a copy of her 2020 book, a memoir about her life called This Is What America Looks Like: My Journey from Refugee to Congresswoman. Ilhan's maternal grandfather went to university in Italy. He returned to Somalia and became director of the National Marine Transport. I'm not sure exactly what this means, but Ilhan says that he worked with the lighthouse system. Unlike the stereotype of people in this part of the world, he believed in equality for girls and women, and he was very influential in Ilhan's life. This side of her family, her mother's side, was part of an ethnic minority in Somalia called the Banadiri, who descend from Arab traders that settled along the southern Somalian coastline. They were generally lighter skinned than ethnic Somalis, though Ilhan says she ended up looking more dark like her father. Ilhan's father, Nur Omar, I think was originally a teacher, but became an accomplished officer in the Somali military, and was educated in the Soviet Union. He rose to the rank of colonel by the end of his military career in 1991 when he and his family fled the country. At this time, much of Somalia was still an agrarian society, and life revolved around clans. People cared a lot about your local family and ethnic ties. There were rules about who you could marry. It was all very old school, the sort of thinking that we Europeans associate with the Middle Ages or with Game of Thrones or something. Ilhan's family was comparatively upper class, progressive, and Western influenced, surrounded by books and culture in a home that Ilhan describes as a compound. Ilhan recalls that she grew up watching Bollywood films and BBC News, learning about culture and conflicts elsewhere in the world. And her family's internal dynamic was very unusual for a Somali family, which is typically strict, traditional, and hierarchical. There was nothing typical about my family. To this day, I don't know a family quite like ours. But in Somalia, where members of an extended family living together are almost always patrilineal, we especially stood out, since my father had moved in with my mother and her family after they were married. Sons usually assumed responsibility for supporting their parents as they aged. My mother, however, wouldn't agree to marry my father unless she could stay with her family. My father didn't have a full appreciation of what he was getting into when he decided to leave everything he knew by the wayside for love. Although he ostensibly fit into my mother's world, as is often the case, he could never completely forget the ways he was born into. My father, an educator, came from a traditional patriarchal Somali family where the boys, the primary beneficiaries of educational investment, were raised to become the leaders of their future families. Meanwhile, when my grandfather welcomed his firstborn child, my mother, he promised himself that she would be treated the same as, if not better, than any male firstborn. Custom dictated that only the birth of a boy was a moment for pride, but Baba, who had a huge presence, was nevertheless very proud. In an interview that Ilhan did with a magazine called The Nation in 2019, she says that her family had a complete distaste for the spread of Wahhabism in Somalia. Wahhabism is basically a more strict, radical form of Islam, a revival movement that wanted to go back to the old ways, or their idea of the old ways. Her family were educated, moderate Sunnis, not the sort of people who would be attracted to reactionary extremism that draws people in during periods of conflict and strife. In 1991, the Somali dictatorship, led by Siad Barre, was overthrown, for a lot of reasons all coming together at once. Barre had been in power for over 20 years and was originally propped up by the USSR in 1969, declaring his country Marxist-Leninist. But then he shifted his alignment to work with the West, giving America access to Somali ports and allowing them to build bases in the region, in exchange for the US providing his regime with ample military support, all while continuing to officially call himself a Marxist-Leninist and communist, oddly enough. In response to his poor performance in the 80s, the appearance of instability and corruption in his regime, and the atrocities that his regime committed in the late 80s in the North, the West backed away from supporting him, and eventually the discontent of his own people became too much and overwhelmed the government. Ilhan recalls the adults around her saying, "I don't understand how everything just turned," as life as they knew it shut down around them. Ilhan Omar's family home was attacked. They fled to elsewhere within the city. They traveled in fear as armed men at every major intersection asked invasive questions, trying to determine which clan they were a part of. There were dead bodies lying in the streets. Ilhan's father was from a northern clan called the Majertine, which was somehow implicated in a clan-based conflict that had erupted between warlords of the Hawiye clan that was taking over the country. Ilhan, at this point in time 8 years old, was told that she had to hide who she was if she didn't want to be killed. She couldn't have fully understood why. Rebel leaders broadcast on the radio their plans to enact an ethnic cleansing of the region. Ordinary people who had once lived as neighbors were suddenly turning against and murdering one another to eliminate those who were from the wrong group. Ilhan's family, including her father, grandfather, and 6 older siblings, fled south to a refugee camp in Kenya, often in conflict with the local Kenyans. Ilhan was 8 years old when she came to this camp and 13 by the time they left. Once they were in America, Ilhan's father, Nur, found that, like many refugees, the status he had in his former country didn't translate to status here. He eventually found work as a cab driver. They appreciated the lives they had, at least they were safe, and he would get to watch proudly as his daughter grew up and became the first Somali member of Congress. He was there in person when she was sworn in with Nancy Pelosi. In the early years after they arrived in America, Ilhan recalls accompanying her grandfather to political events as he tried to participate in American politics, and she helped out as his translator/interpreter. It was very unlike the political process they knew in Somalia. She said of the contrast that in America you could be involved in a political party and you didn't have to be a member of a specific class. She went on to attend university in North Dakota, got a degree in political science, and worked as a community educator with new Americans in immigrant communities, helping them learn about finance and education. Then she got involved in some local political campaigns. She became a campaign manager for a Minneapolis city councilor in 2013. Ilhan is not a very religious person. She's a very accepting progressive. She's not an orthodox Muslim who reads the Quran and expects us all to live by Sharia. She's not an Islamist. I feel like she is a Muslim the way that Joe Biden is a Christian. And this is the case for a lot of people in the world. They don't take their religion super literally and get all militant about it. It's just some shit you do because your parents did it. It's part of who you are. It's part of where you came from. It's part of your cultural performance. In the same way, a lot of white people go to church, but we're not really living by the Bible, right? It's just religion. It's just a community thing. I used to go to church. I still have cross necklaces, but I never seriously believed that Jesus came back from the dead and all that shit, the same way that I don't think there was an actual King Midas who turned everything he touched to gold. These are just stories. So if you're a bit uncomfortable with Islam at times, I feel you, but she's clearly not one of the crazy ones. Let's not go too hard on her if she wants to dress like a nun from the neck up. Think about what Ilhan says when she talks about America, about the problems with the country. Is she saying that America is too liberal? Too secular? Too blasphemous? Is she coming for your freedom of speech to criticize the Quran? Is she trying to impose Sharia law onto anybody? No. She talks passionately about rule of law, democracy, constitutional rights, opposing militarism. By the way, here's a photo of her attending a pride event. Scary Muslim, huh? It really just pisses me off how badly this woman has been treated. She deserved so much better. It's also really been something seeing the flagrant racism toward, not Ilhan specifically this time, but Somalis, in the example of another Somali American, Omar Fateh, who is a state-level politician in Minnesota. They took this deliberately shitty picture of him. I don't know if it's a still from a video where he's talking, because it's pretty blurry. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, are we implying that Somalis are too stupid to be politicians? Because the only other Somali politician I knew of before this guy, the only other one at the federal level that I'm aware of, is Ilhan Omar, who is a more intelligent person and who I would trust with way more than the white man who this person supports being president. Or any of the other various hacks who have somehow made their way into the federal government by his blessing. This is all just so shameful. If you're interested in other cases of unfairly smeared female politicians, maybe you'll check out my other video about Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren. There's probably some feminist commentary I could make here about women getting lied about more than men because they don't do as much to fight back and to make their voices heard, or something like that. Because all three of these women had pretty dumb smears against them, and I feel like they didn't talk about it as much as they could have. They could go online or go on TV and just fucking yap about all the lies told about them. There's so much material. But they all just kind of gave a statement like, yeah, that's not true, and then tried to be the bigger person and move on. I don't feel like it worked for them. Are they nervous about defending themselves too much? Speaking up too much? Being seen as bitchy or shrill? If you say one thing about Trump that he doesn't like, he'll fucking cry about it for the next 6 months, or maybe 6 years. But for some reason it hits different when men are big fucking babies. And these three are not the only women who have been lied about, but then didn't laboriously victimize themselves like a right-wing Twitter comedian who needs us all to know how scared he is of getting cancelled. They had too much dignity, damn it, which I want to respect, but the result is that 10 years later, too many people remember the lies and too few people remember the correction. If you want people to see your correction, you gotta go on and on and on about it. In the attention economy, quantity is very important, often more important than quality. That's a lesson some of us are still learning.
For the reason you decided to wear hijab. I mean, just to that diversity, there are 2 women in Congress right now. One of them wears a hijab and the other doesn't. For me, it was a choice that I made to have a visual representation of my faith. I was a teenager when 9/11 happened, and I really was uncomfortable with many members of our community feeling like they had to strip themselves of their identity in order to mitigate the violence and the fears that they were feeling. And I thought, you know, the best thing that I could do was to make sure that I was visually showing up in every aspect of society as a visible Muslim, so that people can start to associate positive interactions with Muslims.